Hello, this is Talking Europe on France 24. I'm Catherine Nicholson. Now, they're calling it the weaponisation of human beings. Thousands of people, mainly from the Middle East, who've been sold travel packages to Belarus, a non-EU state, and told they will be able to get from there into the European Union. Just a reminder, Belarus borders 3 EU countries, Poland, Latvia and Lithuania, the longest border being with Poland. Belarus's leader, Alexander Lukashenko, has all but admitted that his guards are pushing these people to cross the Polish border. And all the while, thousands of people are camping out in freezing conditions. Several of them have died and many are suffering illness and injuries. Well, Poland's Prime Minister has been seeking support for a wall on the border, paid for by the European Union. Angela Merkel has asked Vladimir Putin to intervene, and the EU has broadened its scope for sanctions against Belarus. Well, with us to discuss how the crisis could be resolved are 2 members of the European Parliament, one from a state with borders with Belarus. Joining us remotely from the European Parliament in Brussels, Anna Fotyga from Poland's governing Law and Justice Party, part of the European Conservatives and Reformists group. She's also a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the European Parliament. Hello, Anna Fotyga.
Hello, good afternoon.
And because this is, of course, a problem for the entire European Union to deal with, we have a voice from elsewhere in the continent. We have Pedro Marques, who's a Portuguese MEP, the Socialists and Democrats group Vice President and its spokesperson for Foreign Affairs and Social Policy. Thank you for being with us here in Strasbourg.
Thank you for the invitation, Catherine.
I'd just like to start off, I'll come to you first, Mr. Marques. As I said, the EU broadened its scope for sanctions on Belarus. It means many more organisations and individuals can be targeted. Will these be effective in your view?
Well, this has been a process. In a sense, it has been effective already, but it needs to be scaled up. We have had several packages of sanctions. They should be targeted. They should not harm the citizens in general, but we need to target Lukashenko and all his friends in the regime, all these people in the regime. So yes, we consider that we need to increase the scope of the sanctions, and as I said, it must have been effective because Lukashenko started this new kind of aggression towards Europe when they became more desperate, when European sanctions were being more effective and causing more damage to the regime and to his allies. And we know, even from the opposition in Belarus, that these sanctions, if well targeted, have also the capacity to divide the regime, to divide his supporters, because they feel more the consequences of their actions towards their country, towards the Belarusians, towards the democratic opposition in Belarus. So I think we are doing well. We should continue, and at the same time, of course, we have to block this aggression by the regime.
Anna Fotyga in the European Parliament in Brussels. Your opinion on those sanctions? Do you agree with Mr. Marques that they're likely to be effective, and split opinion in Belarus?
Sanctions should be extremely strong, adequate to the scope of crimes committed by Lukashenko himself and whole regime, Lukashenko regime. I repeat, the usurper of the presidential power in Belarus. I have my own experience from the time of martial law in Poland and combating the communist regime. Actually, all of us, people linked to the opposition, supported strong sanctions. We were able to suffer not eating properly, but being able to get rid of unwanted regime. And same was communicated by Svetlana Tikhanovskaya clearly today in Strasbourg to MEPs. Then Belarusian society is in favor of sanctions. Sanctions are effective, and actually any voice speaking about concern with sanctions of well-being of the society of Belarus, of ordinary people, are kind of hypocrisy.
Ana Fortiga, I'm going to stay with you. You agree with Pedro Marques, it seems broadly, about sanctions. I think a point where you disagree is a project of your Prime Minister in Poland who wants to build a wall on that external border, and he wants the European Union to pay for it. Can you tell us more about this and why this is what your government wants?
We speak about migration crisis and on Polish-Belarusian border. We usually speak of misusing human beings by Lukashenko. Iraq was invited by President Biden to summit on democracy. Elections have been observed were observed by the EU delegation. Iraq is a country coming out of very difficult situation, but certainly it is not the place where we speak about complete insecurity. So we have to help people there on the ground, but it is not the refugee crisis and migration to Belarus by instigation of Lukashenko regime and Kremlin is something that is to destabilize our territories, and therefore, when we decided to build the wall, it is the decision of Polish Parliament. I think that those actions benefiting whole EU should be also supported financially.
Mr. Marques.
Yes, well, there is a divergence there, let me be clear on that matter, but also on other parts of what Ana Fortiga just referred. These people coming from Syria, coming from Iraq, they come from despair in their own countries. I have been to Lebanon recently, and there are thousands and thousands of Syrian refugees there in total despair. Just because they were put in a plane and came to Belarus, this doesn't mean that they are economic migrants. No, they are in total desperation because they cannot go back to their countries, because there is an authoritarian regime, particularly in Syria. So I cannot concur with the idea that there are not refugees in our border. Yes, there are, even if they were weaponized by Lukashenko. And it wouldn't be our priority to try to secure our border through another wall. Walls have been there in Europe for decades, and they were turned down, or people always find a way to flee around those walls. That was the case in the past. We have memory in Europe, so that wouldn't be our priority. We have mechanisms. We have European authorities to protect our borders, and we would have liked that our humanitarian agencies, the agencies from the UN, but also our entities that are there to protect our borders, could have had access to the Polish border in this crisis. We think that it's much more effective, yes, to secure our border, our common border, but do it in a humane way. Do it in a way in which people's rights are respected. Because the conventions to protect the rights of refugees, they were put in effect decades ago, and by then it was after the Second World War, and it was in a way to protect Europeans that were refugees by then. So we need to be humane now, when so many people are coming to our border. Yes, protect our border, but do it in a humane way. That would be our priority.
Let's get some response from Ana Fortiga, the idea that walls are not the best way to deal with this. There are also humanitarian aspects that are not being handled at this point.
There is legal entry to Poland. If anybody wants to seek international protection, there is possibility to approach Polish consulate in Minsk or official border crossing, and yet they decide to take the illegal and dangerous path, because usually Belarusian forces push those people and help them in most dangerous places, with very complicated territory after eventual illegal crossing. Where they are in need and approached by Polish forces on Polish side, they are provided help, but also with their aggressive behavior and illegal entry, there are decisions to abandon Polish territory.
Well, let's give one last word to Mr. Marques before we wrap up the programme.
Yes, Catherine, I mean, it wouldn't be even remotely coherent to think that tourists, as the Polish authorities sometimes refer to them, and Anna just did, tourists do not try to enter legally into Europe. Tourists do not try to go into the forests and challenge the police on the other side. No, these are desperate people coming from countries living in despair, where their regimes are authoritarian, to say the least. So these are people in despair, because otherwise they wouldn't be trying to force their entry into Europe. So these are, in many cases, these are refugees. They should be handled in a humanitarian way. And I mean, it's not just on the side of the Belarusian border that we cannot access that part of the territory. It's also on the Polish side. Our authorities, the Frontex authorities, the humanitarian agencies, they were not allowed to give any kind of assistance to these people. And unfortunately, people died at that border. So if we want to condemn, and we do want to condemn Lukashenko and his regime, we also have to stand for our values on our side of the border. That's really important. That's why we pledge that our priority is to handle this in a humanitarian way. That should be the priority of Europe.
Okay, unfortunately, we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there, but I'd like to thank you both for joining the discussion, Pedro Marques and Anna Fortiga, who's with us from the Brussels European Parliament. Thanks to you for watching the programme as well. Do stay tuned to France 24. We'll be following this story, of course, as it develops. See you soon here on France 24.